Welcome to the Jamodi podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Biology. What's your BSA score? The Biology Skill Assessment is the only verified skills metric endorsed by the NIA and NJCAA to discover and develop the best talent for your team. This 10-minute, 100-shot test can be taken for free today on the Biology mobile app. Elevate your game. On your platform, I love that you mentioned you have so many different types, styles of plays, and it's a one-stop shop. But if you could choose, maybe your favorite style of play to teach, or when you do go to camps and these ideas that you're sharing, what would that be?
Well, for me, it starts from a principles of play. And I really do think this from a player development standpoint, a team development standpoint. It all starts from whatever your principles of play are. And, I can choose any offense that fits into those principles of play because, as I said, the principles of play are basketball decisions, and those supersede anything else. So for me, I could run Spain pick and roll, or I could run, Princeton or whatever it is. It does not matter the structure. What matters is these principles of play. And for me, I'll just share a few of them, but 0 seconds. 0 seconds means no pause on the catch, no predetermined decision, that you catch it and you're ready to make a play. Shoot it if you're open, pass it if you're not, and then drive it if nobody's open. That type of mentality is really simple, especially coaching my youth, my daughters who, 9 and 11 now, and coaching their team.
How is that? Do you enjoy doing that?
I love it because, again, Matt, I've done camps for a long time, say at 12 plus, and going back to that level where some of them literally have not played basketball before, it reminds me that if I go in with a predetermined understanding of what they need to learn versus I go in with an open mind and see what they need to learn, what a difference.
Wow.
I'm telling you, it opened my mind again. And even though I say those words, I believe those words and I share them all the time, actually experiencing that at that level was just amazing. And it just shifted from within a practice, from practice to practice, to just say, wait a minute, I need to work on this. And then the challenge for me is also to work on it within a games approach, which is I'm trying to do offense versus defense almost all the time, even for unskilled, can't dribble, can't shoot players. Because again, I'm trying to connect the decision for why they need to work on their skill and then inspire them to work on the player-led development on their own a little bit. Okay, how many of them go home and do their parents text me and say, hey, Addison's working on her game, in the driveway? That to me is more of the win than anything that happens in practice.
I wonder, I don't think probably the 8-year-olds don't know or truly appreciate the level of coach they have. Do the parents of that team understand who they have coaching their dog? Because it's incredible. I'm pretty sure it's different than what a majority of the youth experience is.
Well, it's great. I'm sure they have no idea. They have no idea because they're not in our space, Matt.
Right.
They're not in the space where, and I could tell them, hey, look, I presented for NBA coaches, and they'll just okay, cool. But what are you doing for my daughter?
That's right.
And that's the most important thing, to be honest. And I love that about parents. They should value the experience for their daughter. And in this example, or for their child, and that's a part of it. And then it's my job to help them understand a little bit more of the process. And that is always it, whether it's a camp or whether it's coaching. As I said, this age group, I try and educate the parents and I try and put them on the team as much as possible. Say a summer camp, I have 80 kids. The first thing I do is I meet with all the parents and I explain to them what they're going to see, why they're going to see it. And then I create psychological safety for them, hopefully, in saying, you are allowed to talk to me. If you have questions, you're welcome to ask them. I have a purpose and I have a reason behind everything I do, and I'm happy to share it with you.
I'm thinking of our parent meetings at the beginning of the year that most of us coaches have, and how it's normally just about the rules. Like what are the rules or the standards or what your son can't do this year. But what a different mind shift there of I love that what you said, bring them on the team. Mm-hmm. When I was at public school and I was younger and hostile, I had this idea that I was on a different side of the road than the parents, and they're not allowed to cross that road. to get over to me, and I'm not going to cross to get over to them. Being at a private school has really helped me in that way of they literally are paying to go to school at there, so they have more of a right to it. But even beyond that, it's much more of a it's just much more of a great environment when they feel like there's that open door, open communication. But I love the way that you talked about. I think a lot of coaches can take that last bit and really shape or reshape their parent meetings at the beginning of the years.
Can I bring one other example? So when
Absolutely.
I was a college coach, I would always welcome my athletic director. He could come to any practice he wanted. He could come to any film session, any team session. He's busy. He's not coming to everything, and he's very rarely coming. But when he came, I made it a point afterwards, or sometimes during, or sometimes obviously a text or email later, just saying, hey, what were your thoughts? Do you have any feedback? And I'll tell you, Matt, 99% of the time, I didn't care what he said because I wasn't going to do it. Right. But I put him on our team. Like, he felt like he had a voice. He felt like he was making an impact. And there were enough times where I could go back to him and say, hey, I really enjoyed, your comment about this, this, and this. And whether I used it or not, he knows that I at least listened and I valued him, and he felt more a part of the team, but I think there's also, as we said with players, it's a buffet. Not every parent's the same. And not every parent gets to eat at the buffet the same way as other parents. And that's something that, we have to consider in terms of those things. And the difficult parents are usually the ones that just want to be communicated to more. Mm-hmm. And we've got to create that safety for them to be able to be communicated. Going way back, Michigan State Sport Youth Institute, you would think they've done a number of surveys on this over the years, but the number one complaint parents have about coaches is not playing time. It's communication. And that does not surprise anybody, ultimately, if you really reflect on that. Because really, when we talk about playing time, too, that's more about communication. And Matt, don't come and complain about your son or daughter's playing time unless you've come and sat in practice. And I really want parents to come to practice and watch.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah. I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts? I watch, I'm in Texas where football is king.
Yeah.
And every football practice, there are dads lined up down there. And I don't know if the coach is asking them to come or they just, these dads just want to go, but there's this level of jealousy. They don't come to my practices. And I've told them, guys, you're free to, I'd love for you to come to any of them. I think that's where a major disconnect is, because, and why maybe there's more investment in times into the select ball from parents like myself. My son's a freshman. I drive him to practice and I sit there and I watch and listen to everything that's happening at practice, which then in a game, I feel like I'm more invested. Yeah, we just worked on that, but then our high school parents only come for 32 minutes a night and they base everything off of what they see in that time. How do you encourage or get parents to come more?
Well, number one, we're all in the off season right now, more or less. So it's like, for me, I'm never going to work on a player's shot without the parent being involved. Because if I think about who's going to rebound for that player, so I want both parents to be at a session. Maybe it's only a 10-minute session where I go through, Matt's shot and explain to them what we're working on and explain to them how I'm rebounding, and also explain to them that rebounding is not coaching. Rebounding is shutting up and rebounding. And that's a big thing for my daughters too. Like, obviously I can coach every shot they shoot, but I tell them when we're in the backyard, I am just a rebounder. I am just a rebounder. That's my job. I'm just a rebounder because I want you to have a great experience experiencing the game and shooting and not getting coached on every rep. Now, there's times where obviously, they'll ask me, hey, can you help me? I'm struggling with this. And that's cool. That's what I'm there for.
That's a great place to be right there.
That's a great place to be. And that's where I want to be with them, but that's where I want to be with my players too. And that's where a parent should want to be with their child, because I'll tell you again, the value of rebounding for your son or daughter is the conversations beyond basketball. I can't tell you, like, sitting around the dinner table and asking, hey, how was your day, versus rebounding. And then my daughter's starting to tell me something that happened during the day while I'm rebounding for her. Yeah. There's no better moment, and there's no more moment which brings more vulnerability, I feel, to the conversation than us experiencing a sport together and then us talking. And it's just such great fun. So that would be one thing I'd encourage. The other thing I would encourage is I would make it, if they're not going to come, I would make one practice maybe at the beginning of the year, a parent practice where the parents actually get changed and they, you go through the drills and go through the offense. And
no way.
Yeah, because I've done that with coaches. I mean, Matt, if you're at one of my BI academies, you're coming on the floor and you're going to do BDT and you're going to do some of these things. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to create psychological safety for the parents and for you and say, hey, there's no judgment. No one's recruiting you. No one's comparing you. No one's, no one's evaluating you. We're just here. I want you to experience this, because I think sometimes, again, all of us, whether it's a coach or a parent, we don't have the perspective. We can come from a place of sympathy, but it's much different coming from a place of empathy, of actually having experienced something. So you having done BDT, now you can understand a little bit more how your players make mistakes, because you know what? It's not easy what we ask them to do a lot of times. I think that's the same for parents. And a parent coming to a practice and watching, just for me, gives me a conversation that I can go to them at some point and I can say, hey, listen, Matt's really improved at this, this, and this. Come to practice, notice it, but understand here what Matt still needs to improve to be able to play more, because Joey can already do all those things. And it's that type of thing that it's not like we're saying, hey, Joey's better than Matt. Well, he's better at basketball than Matt because he's worked harder at basketball. But it's like Matt can get better. Matt can get better, but here's what it is. And just kind of pointing those things out, I think, help parents understand. Everything's about needs improvement anyways.
And probably a higher level of accountability then on our part as coaches. If we are going to bring them in, I mean, an example I thought of is when you ever invite a friend to your church, how when they come in, you start to notice every little detail more, because you're trying to think like, is this what are they seeing? What are they? I think when you invite those parents in, and I don't know if that example works, but I may be thinking more and more about the details of how we run things, how I'm communicating, how I'm teaching, because of the people in the room.
I attended a Stan Van Gundy practice when he coached the Detroit Pistons, and he gives coaches a sheet of feedback that he wants them to fill out a feedback form afterwards. They can be anonymous or they can not be. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't matter. But I would do that for parents too. And again, whether you read it or not, you make them feel like they're having a voice and having a participatory voice. But again, what do you do for the parent that's too much? That's really the challenge. I think the parents that not involved at all is a huge concern, because I think that should be a concern too. How can we bring that parent more involved in their son or daughter's experience in basketball? But the parent that's over involved is a problem for sure. So how do we curtail that a little bit? Then, one, it's an honest conversation, just like you'd have a player. You want truth or harmony? Josh Merkel just said that on the podcast this week. Do you want truth or harmony? And I would start that. And now I'm stealing that or adapting that line. And I'm going to use that and say, hey, listen, to a parent, I can tell you the truth, or I can tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Which one do you want, basically, is what we're saying.
Everybody will say truth.
Everyone says truth.
But they really want harmony.
They want harmony. But now you can hold them to that.
Right.
It's like the difficult to coach player. Okay, are they difficult to coach, or are they difficult to coach because you as a coach aren't willing to change to coach them in a certain way? So to me, the first thing I do with a difficult to coach player is I'll ask them, hey, do I have permission to coach you? Yes or no? And of course they'll say yes. And now to a certain extent, I've got them, and I'll keep referring back to that and say, listen, wait a minute. I thought we had an agreement. I can coach you. Is that agreement not in place anymore? Because if it's not in place, that's cool. I just want to know up front. Because 80 kids at a summer camp that I do, maybe I'd say generally we have no behavior problems because we keep them on task. But say we do have one player that really just doesn't want to be there and doesn't want to participate, blah, blah, blah. To me, I'll go to them. I'll interact with them in a similar way. Can I coach you? I'll go back to them again. I'll remind them. I'll go back to them again. I'll remind them. So I really am putting effort into trying to bring them on the team. But then at some point, I will just say, that's cool. But just understand, I'm not going to coach you. And if that's what you want, that's cool for me too. And it sucks. It really does suck in that scenario. But what is my responsibility? My responsibility ultimately is to the players that want to be there and to the best players. And that's really what my responsibility is. Because if I spend so much time on the worst player or on the player that doesn't want to be there, I'm taking time away from the best players. And that somewhat is the case for parents as well. If you want to draw that analogy to them, we just got to manage some, but we can put so many on our team that it overcomes that one we have to manage.
And when you have that discussion with the player, you've got to mean it. Like, because I think that the idea of it sounds great to coaches. You want truth or harmony. Well, if they choose or they walk away from the truth that you're giving, then you have, or when you say, listen, I want you to tell me, do you want me to coach you or not? I mean, and you have as a player, you have the right to say, well, no, coach, I don't want to be held to that standard. That if they do answer that way, I mean, I've had that happen. Then you have to show them that you mean what you said. Yeah, because
you can't put in a rule if you're not going to enforce it.
Yeah.
Same thing in this. You can't create an expectation if you're not going to enforce it, and then they have to know the consequence. And I would also outline that, and you can determine that for yourself. But the consequence of me not coaching you is you're not going to get better. You're not going to improve, and people are going to get better than you, and people are going to play more than you. I'm not going to go right to a threat and say, okay, you're not going to play then. Yeah. No, here's the reason you're not going to play. You're not going to play as much as you want to play because you're not going to improve because you're not letting me coach you. Mm-hmm. There's a direct correlation between those two things. So connect that as a way. So it's not a threat. It's just literally you're not going to get better or as good as you could get.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.